Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Mobalytics video. Today we're taking a look at the most hated champions to play against in League of Legends Season 12. We're going to cover a few choices for each role in this video to make sure we don't just talk about the same type of champions and to make sure nobody feels left out. There are a ton of reasons why certain champions are hated. Some are just annoying to play against, some have infuriating abilities, and some are just plain tilting to look at. So here is the list that we've put together, and let us know if you agree with our choices. A quick question for you guys before we get started is, which champion would you completely remove from the game if you had the chance? My personal vote is going to go to Sion. I just can't get over losing games against the 0 and 22 top laner who just wins by one-shotting my Nexus. Anyway, let's get stuck in and start off with that top lane, and I'm sure you can all guess who's first on the list. Yep, it's Tryndamere. Now this guy has been in League of Legends since the very start, and not a lot has actually really ever changed as to why he's so disgusting to play against. Tryndamere is all about early aggression, high damage with his inbuilt crit, his relentless mobility and chase, and of course the most tilting of all, his ultimate. Tryndamere is such a pub stomping champion in the way that if players don't understand him, they will simply just int him. Tryndamere can capitalise on lack of enemy experience so easily, and before you know it, he's 10-0 and impossible to shut down. His dueling potential is genuinely unmatched when he's in the lead, and he can basically just walk into side lanes all game and either 1v9 or just destroy your entire base. Tryndamere is so annoying to play against at pretty much all stages of the game, whether it's in lane with his stupid damage and sustain, whether it's in team fights where he triple kills your backline in a second, or even if he's just split pushing and taking out every single turret on the map. Now there is an obvious reason why there are so many Tryndamere one-tricks in high elo. It's just so damn hard to beat, and I don't think that there's many people that would disagree with this choice. Next up, we've got another historically hated champion who's also been around since the start, Teemo. The devil himself and the champion with a global taunt has always been a nightmare to play against, and in Season 12 he's just as irritating as ever. Before you even consider the playstyle and the kit of this champion, he's already tilting just to look at. His voice emotes, his laugh, and his tiny little presence just make you want to kill him from the get-go, but then he auto-attacks you 18 times in the first minute of the lane phase, and you probably consider uninstalling. Teemo is the ultimate tilting champion from that top lane. For a start, it's just his ranged advantage, his poisons, and of course his blind that make him just so frustrating to play against. But then he gets level 6 and spams the whole lane and the whole map with his mushrooms. I mean, every time I walk into a mushroom, a little part of me dies, as I know there's a player behind that Teemo just cackling at home behind his keyboard as I'm burning to death. Teemo just epitomizes a champion that tilts his enemies. Consistent poke, a blind that prevents you from attacking him, and those pesky mushroom mines ruining your day one game at a time. Our final choice for the top lane's most hated trio is going to be Akshan. The Rogue Sentinel has kind of become the Rage Sentinel, and for a champion that felt like it was supposed to be based in the bot lane, he's taking it out on the solo lanes instead. Since he's released, his early game damage and his poke and trade and all-in potential has just felt so aggravating to play against. He gets in lane, levels up first, and basically just runs at you with Ignite. When he's got his E up, he can simply just dive you and escape for free, and by this point you're probably regretting queuing up in the first place. Akshan's range, his burst, his poke and his mobility are tilting enough as it is. But then you factor in the fact that he can actually revive his whole team if he kills the right person, and yeah, he's a bit of a problem. Akshan is the definition of a modern League of Legends champion. His kit feels a bit too overloaded and his playstyle is just so oppressive to play against, and if you do let him snowball, you're going to find him really hard to beat. Akshan is just one of those champions that you simply love winning games against, and that's probably not going to stop anytime soon. Let's move on to the jungle now, and the first most hated champion we've got to talk about here is going to be Shaco. Shaco has several abilities that make him super frustrating to deal with. His Deceive is definitely one of the main culprits. Any champion that has stealth instantly becomes more viable for these kind of videos, and Shaco's low cooldown blink stealth on his Q is definitely pretty rough to play versus. This ability allows him to jump into your lane without you knowing, and before you know it, your health pool is vanishing right before your eyes. This also means that he can gank from as early as level 2, which is so hard to beat unless you basically just sit under your turret until you see him on the map elsewhere. Another ability that causes us all to hate this champion is going to be his Jack-in-the-Box. These are littered around everywhere and are both A, incredibly annoying, and B, they just deal so much damage if he's built AP. Then you factor in his ultimate, which jukes and confuses and has the potential to blow up in your face, and you've completed that annoying cocktail of a champion. If all of these annoying abilities weren't enough, you've got the type of playstyle that this champion actually has. He darts in and out of fights, littering boxes, bursting you and your teammates, and then just pops into stealth and runs away until he fancies fighting another day. Viego is next in our most hated list in the jungle, and this champion has been absolutely everywhere since his release. Viego has seemingly been one of the most difficult champions in the game to balance since he came out, as the majority of the time he just feels a bit broken and has sat at one of the highest ban rates for such a long time. Viego is just so damn hard to take down with that ultimate and those resets. He can genuinely do nothing all game, and then one fight where he manages to get that reset, he can clean up and get another pentakill. Viego's kit has got everything in it you'd expect from a champion on this list. He has stealth, he has mobility, he has burst, he has untargetability and healing even in the same spell. Viego has the ability to win the most unwinnable games with one lucky fight, and that means no matter how well you play against him, there's always a chance of a freak fight that he ends up carrying. God forbid if Viego does get fed early game though, he's going to walk around and kill anyone and everyone he sees. Luckily, Viego is definitely not quite as absurd as he has been in the past, and right now, although the champion's kit is strong, he doesn't feel as auto-win as he did previously. That isn't going to change too much though, and the fact that the majority of players are still going to despise him. Evelynn is the third most hated jungler on this list, and oh, would you look at that, it's yet another champion with stealth. That makes 5 out of the 6 champions we've mentioned so far all having some kind of stealth in their kit. Evelynn is a little bit more unique though, as her invisibility is almost permanent. Evelynn's whole playstyle is designed around this mechanic, and this alone makes her incredibly infuriating to play against. When you're versus Evelynn, it basically means that you have to expect her right behind you at all points in the game. Thankfully though, Evelynn's pre-6 is a period of time when you can usually play the game, but after that, and especially in the mid game, the Rift becomes a pretty terrifying place to be in. If you have the misfortune of facing off against a good Eve 1 trick, it's always going to be a very difficult game to win. The damage that this champion can do with just a few items in the mid game, and just how hard it is to play around her and actually kill her afterwards due to her ultimate, really make her so aggravating to play against. Eve is another champion that's been around for a very long time, and she's almost always had this most hated status. Now she's probably not played as much these days as she has been in the past, but when you do see her locked in against you, a little piece of you dies inside. Moving on to the mid lane now, and before we get started with our most hated choices for this role, we're going to have to throw a quick mention to Yasuo. Now this one is fairly unique, as this champion is actually the most hated champion no matter which team he's actually on. If he's on your team, he's 0 and 10 inside 15 minutes, and if you're against him, he's probably 1v9ing. However, we're choosing these other picks based on playing against them, and there are a few others that just take the cake. The first of those is going to have to be Akali. This champion is just so damn infuriating to lose to. Akali is the kind of champion that new players think is incredibly difficult, but when you actually play her, you realise just how easy it is to face roll the entire enemy team. Akali is another champion who's always been difficult to balance. Even back in the early days of League, I can remember those 3 dash charges on my ultimate slapping people around in Dominion. Wow, what a throwback. In modern League though, she's very different in her kit, but equally as oppressive. Thank God people aren't spamming the chem tank Akali anymore though. So Akali is another choice who ticks that stealth box, and there's nothing more annoying than popping your exhaust on her and she just sits in her W and waits for it to time out. Exhaust is one of the main forms of counterplay against assassins, especially for AD carries, and this W alone makes her very hard to 1v1. Akali's base damage and burst windows are ridiculous, and if she has her ultimate, you're almost guaranteed to get popped if you get anywhere near her. Her mobility, her burst, stealth and unbelievable damage make her a worthwhile contender for this list, and we definitely don't think that's going to change anytime soon. The next mid laner is probably one of the most banned mid lane champions ever, and that's going to be Zed. A good Zed player is terrifying to lane against, and before you know it, you've been dove 6 times before you can complete your first mythic item. Zed is a very tricksy champ with a ton of creative ways to outplay his opponents, but when you're playing against him, there's very little admiration for this and a lot more frustration. Zed's mobility with his shadows make him incredibly difficult to actually get hold of, and if the player behind him knows what they're doing, he can be insanely unpredictable. When Zed gets fed, the game just feels a bit hard, especially when you're a bit of a squishy target, as he can waltz into your jungle, into a side lane or into a team fight, pop you with his shurikens and spam that laugh emote until the sun goes down. The third and final most hated mid laner in today's video is going to be the one and only Katarina. It's actually quite surprising to me when forming this list just how many champions there are that have been in the game for over a decade. Katarina has always had that 1v9 status, and again one that's been banned so much for so long. Much like Akali, Katarina used to be very different, but equally as disgusting. I still remember first timing Katarina in ranked back in the day and diving into Baron Pit on my own and picking up an instant pentakill just by pressing R. Katarina's mobility, damage and reset potential is just ridiculous, and it genuinely feels like it always has been. Her ability to take TP Ignite and just dominate the entire map makes her very difficult to beat. It's a fairly simple way to win games by just roaming around and cleaning up every single fight, but it really does work on Katarina. Another reason why so many people hate Katarina so much is that every single Katarina one trick makes sure the whole world knows that they are one with their name. They always seem to have some variation of Kitty Katar in it, and Katarina will forever have a place on this list and probably has done since the very start of League of Legends. Let's get onto the bot lane now, and in that first position we've got Draven. Draven is the ultimate pub stomping powerhouse from that AD carry position, and oh boy does this guy hurt. Draven's early game damage and snowballing potential with his passive make him an absolute nightmare to lane against, and when someone knows how to actually play him, it's not going to be a lot of fun for you. You just see so many Draven players as you climb the ranks, as he's such a 1v9 champion from that bot lane. You know those games where you spend 25 minutes farming in the bot lane as Vayne and then you get one shot by a bruiser with 3 levels on you? Well, that's how it feels when you play as anyone else on the map and you walk into a fed Draven. Draven is not just an AD carry who destroys bot lanes, he gets so fed and has such an item lead that anyone that walks downstairs just gets popped. Draven doesn't have stealth, he doesn't have mobility, and he doesn't really have an overloaded kit like some of the others on this list, but what he has is damage, and there is nothing quite like it. The second AD carry for this most hated list just has to be the rat himself, Twitch. The ambushing, ganking stealth rat is easily one of the most tilting champions to play against, and when he pops out of stealth shouting, "Hi!" and deleting your entire team, it's really not much fun at all. Twitch may be pretty vulnerable early game, but he still has ways to cheese his way through it and gain a lead in the most random of ways. Whether it's roaming mid or ganking his own lane with stealth, he just always seems to find a way to get fed. Once Twitch has a few items, he can simply just light up entire teams with his AoE damage and burst from his ultimate as it sponge. If you overcommit to any of his teammates and forget about him, by the time you see him, you're probably all going to die. If you have no CC left over, the rat will punish you instantly for it. Twitch is probably one of the most difficult AD carries to beat when he's being played by someone who truly knows how to exploit this champion's cheesy potential, and that alone makes him well worthy of the position in this video. The third and final position has to go to Caitlyn, a champion that doesn't really do anything apart from just auto attack you from 2 screens away. Caitlyn has always been the most oppressive AD carry in the lane phase, and she's been bullying inexperienced bot laners for as long as the game has existed. Caitlyn may not have all of the toxic traits that most champions on this list have, as it's mainly genuinely due to just her auto attack range, her poke, and her bullying in lane that make her so toxic. If Caitlyn gets partnered up with a heavy sustain support or someone who can also help her poke like a Zyra, it's a pretty horrifying experience to say the least. Caitlyn is especially frustrating to play against in solo queue, as quite often your jungler just won't punish her for playing so reckless. Caitlyn often leaves herself vulnerable to ganks by pushing and poking 24/7, but it only makes her hate you more by the fact that she doesn't get punished for it. If Caitlyn does get ahead in the early game, it makes her so annoying in the mid game, as this is actually the weakest part of her game, but if she gets ahead, she walks around the map, deleting turrets and bursting you down from miles and miles away. Time to finish off this video in the support role, and the most hated support in the game is gonna have to be the cat, Yuumi. There is just no way anyone can tell me that this champion is not one of the most hated champions in the entire game. So she's a tiny little cat that sits on her AD carry, which really doesn't sound too threatening, but when you factor in what this champion brings to the table, you genuinely feel your blood boiling. Yuumi's poke, her buffs, her shields and her ultimate just make your opponents feel immortal, and she can float around, bouncing between targets, prioritizing her most fed teammates. Yuumi is not just hated on her own though, it's actually her ability to make you despise other champions that she synergizes well with. Garen, Hecarim, Kayn, Fiora, Zeri are to name a few, or just basically any champion that can benefit from all of the tools that Yuumi provides. Yuumi is one of the most banned supports ever to hit the Rift, and the fact that she looks so easy to play definitely additionally contributes as to why people really despise this champion. Lock in Yuumi, watch random videos on YouTube, get yourself a coffee, play a bit of Lost Ark, and then just tab back in now and again just to press a few more buttons. The second most hated support is going to have to be Pyke. Now don't get me wrong, any kind of hook support has always been annoying to play against, like Blitzcrank and Nautilus with that ridiculously wide Q, but Pyke just feels a little bit worse than the others. Pyke's early game aggression and his all-in potential make him a real threat to lane against, and it's not much fun playing super scared all the time because you really just don't want to int him. Pyke's stealth and the mobility on his W also make him really frustrating to play against, as this will just allow him to be really unpredictable and to roam with ease. All of a sudden you're getting spam pinged and flamed by your mid laner for Pyke killing them when he was in your lane 10 seconds beforehand. Pyke's annoying traits don't stop there though, his ultimate is insane and can easily be the difference in the majority of fights. An experienced Pyke can clean up with ease and burst you down before you can say is this even a support champion. Pyke's mobility, his burst, his damage, his resets and everything else that goes with it make the majority of players absolutely hate this champion, and he's definitely sitting comfortable on this list. The last support for this most hated list and the final champion of the day is going to have to go to Brand. This is a champion you may not see as often as some of the other champions on this list, but when you see them you instantly feel a little bit tilted. If you've already locked in an immobile marksman in that bot lane and they pick Brand against you, you know it's not going to be a fun experience. Brand's poke in lane and his relentless harass are just so frustrating to play against, but then he gets level 6 and 1v2s you and your support and you question why this champion isn't permabanned. Brand does have pretty obvious weaknesses unlike some of the champions on this list, and there are definite ways you can beat him, but if you misplay for a second, you will get instantly punished for it. The damage that he can deal both instantly with his burst and over time with his burn and Liandry's make him top the charts easily from that support role. Brand is actually probably the highest damaging support in the game if they manage to play it correctly, and it can be absolutely devastating to play against. A good Brand can truly 1v2 or even 1v3 with ease, and this just makes him such a big threat. When it comes to the most hated supports, some of them have lots of healing, some of them have hooks. Brand, however, just has a boatload of damage. Well, that's going to conclude our 50 most hated champions to play against in League of Legends Season 12. We really hope you agree with our choices and let us know in the comments who you hate playing against and why. That's all from us here at Mobalytics, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.